front of a whiteboard, surrounded by stunned executives. A complicated algorithm sprawled across the board in her handwriting. "Who did this?" he demanded. Maria turned slowly. "I did, sir." And that moment changed everything. David Hartley, 45, was the respected, sharp-tongued CEO of Helix Systems, one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing tech giants. Known for his no-nonsense leadership and multi-billion-dollar acquisitions, David was the embodiment of success. But behind the towering glass walls of the company and his sprawling mansion in Palo Alto, he carried a deep sadness, a hole left behind by his wife's death 3 years prior and the growing disconnect with his only daughter, Lily. Maria Alvarez, 29, was the quiet, unassuming housemaid who worked at David's estate. She was efficient, polite, and always invisible in the way staff are expected to be in homes like his. But what no one knew was that Maria had once been a computer science prodigy from Mexico, with a brilliant mind and a dream to build software that made the world more equitable. Those dreams were shelved when her father died suddenly, and her family fell into poverty. She'd migrated to the U.S., working odd jobs to send money back home, never once mentioning the university scholarship she had declined or the published research paper she had authored at 20. Instead, she swept, scrubbed, and silently watched the world she once belonged to. Helix Systems had recently hit a wall. A security flaw in their newly launched AI financial platform had left them vulnerable to a potential $200 million data breach. Customers were pulling out. Stocks were plummeting. The board was panicking. And after weeks of round-the-clock work, the best minds at Helix were still unable to patch the issue. David brought in experts from across the globe. He personally worked 16-hour days, desperately searching for a fix. But nothing worked. At home, he barely spoke. Lily complained he was never present. Maria, as always, cleaned in silence, often overhearing his late-night Zoom meetings and stressed-out phone calls. But one evening, as David sat at his breakfast table, head buried in code sheets and performance charts, Maria placed his coffee next to his hand and paused. Her eyes scanned the lines of code. "Sir," she said gently. "May I say something?" David glanced up, startled. "You know this?" "I used to. I studied this kind of system years ago," she said, eyes downcast. He looked skeptical but waved at the mess on the table. "Be my guest. Nothing's working anyway." She stared at the code, brows furrowed in thought. Then she calmly turned the page, picked up a pen, and rewrote an entire logic chain. Her fingers moved fast, her confidence effortless. David leaned closer, watching as the structure shifted into something elegant. "You just eliminated the entire recursive loop," he murmured. She smiled shyly. "The vulnerability lies in how the system calls external authorization. You're validating inputs after trust. It should be reversed." He blinked. "What's your name again?" "Maria. Maria Alvarez." The next day, David couldn't shake the curiosity. He asked her to explain it again, this time in the office. She hesitated, terrified at the idea of entering Helix's campus, afraid of being mocked or sent away. But he insisted. When they arrived, his top engineers laughed, until Maria took the marker, stepped to the board, and rewrote the system architecture in under 5 minutes. Dead silence. Then applause. David stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. He asked questions. And as they spoke, Maria told him her story, the scholarship, the research paper, the family tragedy, her sacrifices. It humbled him. He, who had built empires, had forgotten the human cost of opportunity. David had her application reopened with MIT and Stanford. Both responded enthusiastically, they remembered her. He brought her on board Helix as a consultant. She hesitated, insisting she wasn't qualified anymore. "You solved what our entire company couldn't in seconds," he said. You don't need permission to be brilliant. Not everyone was thrilled. Board members questioned David's decision. They saw Maria as an uncredentialed risk. Whispers of "Maid turned hacker" filled the office halls. But David stood by her. He gave her the floor in board meetings. She presented solutions to lingering bugs. She fixed legacy issues in old systems. Within weeks, client confidence returned. The breach was fully patched. Media picked up the story. CEOs made saves tech giant from $200 million disaster. But in every interview, Maria redirected the spotlight. I wasn't a maid who suddenly became a genius. I was always a genius. I just wasn't seen. Through it all, Maria became more than just a colleague. She became someone David admired, and slowly, someone Lily trusted too. She taught Lily coding basics, and Lily loved it. One rainy afternoon, as Maria watched Lily build her first app, David watched them both and whispered, "You've brought something back to this home I thought was lost forever." 6 months later, David launched Project Polaris, an initiative to find and fund brilliant minds hidden in the shadows of society. Janitors, waitresses, drivers, immigrants, anyone with untapped talent. Maria became its first director. Helix Systems doubled its value in under a year, but more importantly, it became a beacon of human potential. At an international tech summit, Maria stood on stage, keynote speaker beside global titans. Behind her was the quote she had once scribbled in her journal, now Helix's new motto. Genius doesn't need permission, it needs opportunity. In the front row, David clapped proudly. Lily sat beside him, smiling. And somewhere far behind them, in homes and hearts all over the world, people who had been unseen finally felt visible. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The janitor sweeping the floor, the maid washing dishes, the delivery boy riding in the rain, they may carry within them the answers to problems the world hasn't even dared to ask. All they need is a chance.